Okay, I'm gonna stand back here. Hi, everybody. Hello.
All right, well, we could get started. I wanted to say, Miigwech, thank y'all for being here. And also, Miigwech to Amy and everyone who's like made this happen. Miigwech for getting me out here with the planes. And yeah, throughout the evening, I would like it if like people took some snacks with them as well. But I can introduce myself first in my language, just because it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable when public speaking, even if it's like a smaller group or a larger group. I think it like aligns my spirit. But Buju Giiwedin Indigenous Makwan and Dundame, Gazagas for Jamaica, Ijinakazo Ishkanegan. Hi, my name is Giiwedin, which means North Wind in Ojibwe. I'm from Leech Lake Reservation, and just going to put that down. And I'm Bear Clan. I'm Anishinaabe, Ojibwe specifically. Anishinaabe are comprised of three tribes: Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. And we reside around the Great Lakes region. So I'm a ways from home, but this land is very beautiful, and like the communities down here are so beautiful. And there's a lot to learn from each other and from our different backgrounds and the lands that we come from. One of the things that I was talking about with a friend who frequents going back and forth between Minnesota and Tucson, which is also the high desert, is the lands and the medicines that are there are very different, but they teach different things. Things out here are a lot more slow and ancient, and that power is ancient versus like not versus, but in comparison to back home where I'm from, there's so many seasons that go by so quickly. We have the summer, the spring, the winter, and like all of the plants and the trees and stuff grow fast and die fast as well. So the time just works a little bit differently, which I think is very beautiful, and I definitely feel it when I'm out here. I feel a little bit slower, but I'm Two-Spirit, and that's what I'm going to be talking about with y'all today. I'll be going into a bunch of different like the nuances there. I'll also be talking about like my tribe's uh, numerous gender terms and ways of describing sexuality and gender in our language, Anishinaabe-Moan. And then I'll also just be talking about like some history related to that and why we have the word Two-Spirit now and how it was a replacement for an offensive term. But I think we all here know that across Indigenous cultures, ways to name identities, roles, relationships, and experiences that didn't fit the European idea of gender and sexuality that we currently live under. That there was so much variability, just like the land, and so much duality, just because like we mirror the land, and the land is so fluid and dynamic, and so it makes sense that we all are as well, and our tribal communities. And I think it's also important to note that we are not a monolith, and that there's no one such thing as Native American culture, because Native American, just like Two-Spirit, is an umbrella term that describes a bunch of different tribal nations. And bringing that back to what I am and the experiences that I can speak on, being Anishinaabe, and that's kind of really what I'll only focus on. But I'll be talking about like some other communities like the Meskwaki. Yeah. But my people, we have a gender neutral language. Anishinaabe-Moan is there's no gendered pronouns, and I believe that's something that has allowed our communities to kind of evolve to have upwards of 15 gender terms. So I tell people I'm Two-Spirit, but if I have more of an opportunity to talk with them and share a little bit more about my background, I tell them I'm a Kwe-Watiza, which is one of the ways that I would describe myself in Anishinaabe-Moan, and that is someone who has a feminine spirit or feminine nature. But I would also say that I'm Bakani and Nadize, which is another descriptor for a way of being, and that just means like someone who's different or someone who, in my understanding of it, someone who's queer. But yeah, there's numerous, and one of importance that I'll be all of them are important, but one of importance, historical importance that I'll be talking about is Agokwe or Ayakwe, because there is a historical figure, historical, to me, icon, who was named Ozawindib. And she's, in a modern context, we would maybe understand her to be a trans woman, but she would have been called and was called by her community Agukwe or Ayakwe, which is someone who is deemed male at birth but takes on the Ojibwe woman's roles and lives and is seen and is accepted as a woman by the community. But yeah, first, before we like describe what Two-Spirit is, I think it's important to talk about like where it came from, and that's the third intertribal uh, Native American First Nations Gay and Lesbian Conference in Winnipeg. That was in 1990, and the queer natives that were there wanted to create a term that would replace the offensive term berdache, which is seen all throughout since contact up until like the late 1800s. That's what settlers were that's the word that the settlers were using to refer to people from numerous tribal communities who were outside of the Western binary. And one in particular, who's from my tribe, Ozawindib, has been described by numerous white settlers. John Tanner, who's also known as the Falcon, and also Alexander Henry, who's a fur trader. But in their journals and in their recounts of their life, they talk about encountering Ozawindib in Minnesota and throughout Anishinaabe territory, and how she was someone who was a curious compound. And I'm like paraphrasing and stuff, but a curious compound between a man and a woman, and how she was accepted and accepted by the Indians. And there's a painting in particular too as well. Uju, hi. Would you like to sit? I think we're just having a little intro. Oh, great, thank you. Thanks. Also, if you'd like some snacks, there's some fruit and stuff. But yeah, Ozawindib is someone who I look to as a queer ancestor and a queer relative, because she through, and I'm not much for academics and like all of that, but I know that people are very like, it's important to cite and to like know all of the sources for some reason. But one of the things across my research was I found she was Bear Clan, which is what I am. So that would mean that we are spiritually related. And her being from the same community that I'm from, not just being Anishinaabe, but from Leech Lake, Gazagaswa Jamaicog, I do like to think that in my bloodline she is someone that is there. But yeah, so at the conference in 1990, there was they saw the need to replace that offensive term berdache, because it did nothing but it was nothing but a label that was put onto our queer ancestors by white settlers, and it was also reductive to like what their actual roles were, because the term berdache, they were using it to just describe them as like, and I hate using language like this, but I think it's like important to draw from those historical sources, and also use the language that they used to kind of just give a broader understanding. But they referred to berdache as disgusting creatures and as like abominations and as sodomites, and so that word really does hold that negative energy, and that's what our queer relatives wanted to change. And so there was an elder there, Myra Laramie. She was Fisher Cree First Nation, and she, in a dream, an Anishinaabe word came to her, and it was Nijmaniduag, which does quite literally mean two-spirit. But the way that there's a whole discourse around this as well, which there's one of the things with being not a monolith, like Indigenous peoples as a whole, that goes the same for our tribal communities. So like one Dakota community can also be different from another Dakota community, even though they're both Dakota, and that's the same for Anishinaabe. And so I'm not going to say that like that translation or the way of saying that is wrong, but the way that I've heard it and other people who have had this discourse is Manidu are those outside spirits. They're not the ones that are within us. Within us are Ajajak. But I think that's also just like there's disconnect between different communities and maybe like language and stuff and learning. So one of the things that I've been told by another Anishinaabe Two-Spirit person is not to use Nish Maniduwag, but to use Nish Ajujak, which is that inner spirit and having those two inner spirits. But that original meaning was meant to, or was translated and was understood to be someone who had both the spirit of a man and the spirit of a woman in them. And that is true for some people today, but since then it has gone through numerous evolutions and has changed and has been not changed, but has grown more expansive because you can't just use one tribe's understanding for all of them. But yeah, I also want to reiterate that like with the Nij Manidawag being a potential mistranslation, that doesn't mean that that is like wrong or should not be used. But so that word came to replace Berdash because of the offensive nature. And there's a specific painting that I reference in presentation slides that I normally have accompanied with me that do kind of help me like stay on like the track of like boom, boom, boom. But that painting is called Dance to the Berdash, and it's by George Catlin or George Caitlin, a white painter and also like anthropologist that I don't know, and I have not cared to do the research of if his name is Catlin or Caitlin. Because I don't think he would care to do the due diligence of getting my name right, Giiwedin. But this painting depicts a Meskwaki person who is Agokwe or Ayakwe. And I think I'm using like my people's dialect of what their people call this person, but it's depicting a dance celebrating this two-spirit person. And in his writings about the painting, he goes on to talk about how it was unaccustomable and it was disgusting, and it was a tradition that he hoped would die out, and that he also hoped would not be seen by others so that it wouldn't be further recorded. But I have friends who are Meskwaki and who hold those traditions, and yeah, it's just beautiful to know that like to this day they still do that, and he did not get his wish that like those traditions would die out. And then one of the other things that I wanted to talk about before we get to like the actual definition is another painting that is very graphic that I show sometimes in my presentations that I give, but I don't show all the time. It's really dependent on like how I'm feeling, if I have like a heavy heart that day, or if I also feel like the audience that like I'm going, if it's like younger college students, then like I won't. But it's this painting by Theodore Debris, and it depicts Cueva people, and up above the people who are on the ground, there are conquistadors there, and I think the painting, it has numerous titles, but one of the titles that I've seen is feeding the sodomites or the berdash to the dogs, and so the dogs are mauling. It's a very graphic, but that I think just goes to show the persecution that people who were gender variant all throughout like colonization have been like attacked, and these customs and these traditions were there were attempts to make them disappear, and for some tribal communities that is the case. They don't have their words, but that's also one of the things where indigiqueer, which I'll also talk about towards the end when I'm giving the full definition of two-spirit that I use, but is not necessarily what everyone will use. But indigiqueer and also two-spirit as those placeholders or those umbrella terms. But yeah, that painting is very graphic. But yeah, I am now going to get onto like the actual definition of it, which is a very long one, and it takes a lot of like thinking critically about the different layers because there are a lot of layers to it. I first want to start out with being two-spirit is not synonymous with being gay and native. It's not synonymous with being non-binary and native, queer and native, trans and native. But it can be. You can be gay and native and two-spirit, trans and native and two-spirit. um, Two-Spirit, the identity itself is complex. And I think it's always important to like reiterate that it does mean different things to different people. And that doesn't mean that like that definition is wrong or like those other definitions are wrong. Given that this is something that had an original meaning at one point in time and an original like purpose to unify queer Indigenous people across Turtle Island and beyond, to what it is now. So I would describe it as like a contemporary umbrella term that can be a placeholder, that describes and honors the various genders, sexualities, and community roles for specific tribal communities. And it's expansive. And it's also important to note that while it can be a placeholder, that doesn't mean that it is a replacement for words that communities already have to describe those respected members of those communities who we would maybe now look at and maybe put the label of queer or LGBTQ plus on. But with that original meaning of two-spirit being someone who had both the spirit of a man and a woman, that does inherently uphold like a binary, and that's a conversation that a lot of queer natives have been having, and one that I've been following along with. But because of that, there has been an introduction of a new term, indigiqueer, that I also use. But indigiqueer was coined by T.J. Cuthand, who's a Cree filmmaker and performance artist. But that's one that like I have seen and I have met a lot of people who do use, and it's very beautiful, and I love that term. But ultimately, it is up to the like individual choice of the native person. And one of the things with this term, with two-spirit and indigiqueer, is it inherently is based off of being indigenous, so it can't be used by someone who's not, even if they feel like gravitated towards it. One of the ways that I describe it to other people, especially when I'm giving talks at universities, because those universities, it's normally I'm giving the talk to like a non-native audience. I tell them they wouldn't identify as something that's like that they're not. So like they wouldn't identify as Ojibwe, like what I am, because there's no way to separate, like yeah, separate that, because Two-Spirit was created by queer natives for queer natives. And also, I also just like to like end it off with like saying that the term Two-Spirit, the term indigiqueer, and what other or whatever other like terms there are, that's up to the own self-determination of like the native person, which we love to hear about like self-determination and sovereignty. But those are like our sovereign choices to be able to describe how we identify. So I say I'm Two-Spirit. I say I'm indigiqueer. I also say that I'm queer, but if I go further, I refer to myself as a Giiwedin in Anishinaabe-Moan, and that just means someone who has like a feminine spirit or a feminine nature. And I think I already said this to y'all, but Bakani and Nadizet. And yeah, gender has been something that I've always like expressed and experimented with and flowed with, and that's something that like I'll continuously do throughout my life. Which I think is just like one of the beautiful things of being able to take part in creation and be a human. Um, but one of the ways that like I'm honoring my two-spirit identity, my identity as someone who is a Giiwedin is through these birch bark fightings. These are this like for Anishinaabe people, and I think also Cree people, but I can't speak definitively for them because I'm not Cree. This is something that's done by the women. The women would bite designs on bark that they learned from the babies, because when babies were teething, they would put medicines or sugar in little birch bark ornaments or instruments and give them to the babies, and they would leave little marks. But it's also it's an endangered art form, or it used to be. Within the last decade, I think there's more than a handful of artists, but I've been self-teaching myself this since February. And it's been something that like I've looked to Pat Bruder, who is an amazing birchbark artist. She's also known as Half Moon Woman, but there's also uh, Denise Ledargeron, who's also an Anishinaabe and is from the Turtle Mountain in South Dakota. But there's numerous birchbark biting artists that are out there. Um, but yeah, this is one of the things that I sunk my teeth into, and is one of the ways that like I describe or not describe, but I connect with that because I do know, and I like, especially like growing up in northern Minnesota on Leech Lake Reservation, that I present and I was socialized as a man, um, and that's how the world perceives me. But taking on this art form that has been traditionally only been done by the women, by the Ikwewug, that's one of the ways that I'm like connecting and honoring that part of my spirit inside. But it's something that is very that I just absolutely love because it's taught me a lot of patience, because all of these pieces are single pieces of birch bark. Some of them might actually have two pieces that were tightly packed together that I wasn't able to peel. But this piece of birch bark has about like anywhere from 20 to 40 to 50 layers that are tightly packed together because that's how the Wasimatig, the birch tree, grows. But stripping the bark from the tree, if done right, also will not kill the tree. And you just can't go too deep. Um, and there are trees that back in my community that have been stripped years ago that are still thriving. They form a scar over the course of 5-10 years depending on their age. But I can pass this around so y'all can kind of see. But one of the things that I really love about birchbark fighting is the use of light, like to see the designs as they come through. And it also has made me a little bit more like cognizant of my oral health, because prior to that I'm an honest person, and I'll just say that like I only really brush my teeth once a day, but now I brush 2-3 times a day. And yeah, this also is something that if you, after we're done talking, go through a Q&A, if you want to come up and feel, there's also some over there. You can feel how like it's not that thick, and so like the biting, it doesn't, it won't. I don't think it wears my teeth down. And like it doesn't harm it. And also, birch bark it is antimicrobial. But yeah, we call this mazana baganagan, and it's one of the things that I've been very fortunate to teach myself, and I'm thankful that I've had the time to learn it. But one of my goals, since I've only been doing this since February, is to hopefully do an apprenticeship or like meet with other birch bark biting artists that are out there to kind of learn more about the different ways in which like you can use geometry to do all of the things. But I was gonna give a quick fold demonstration, and also just something so that y'all can see. But so like there's nothing on it. It's just a little. It kind of also feels like a fun magic trick. I like to do this. I've done this while out with friends. But you want to fold with the white side down. I also like to think that this will be good for my old age, in terms of it's really good for the brain because it helps with spatial awareness. Because I quite literally am biting it and I can't see what I'm doing. I can only feel with my teeth and also with my fingers. I use my fingers to guide. Um, there are some like really skilled artists out there, like Half Moon Woman, and Denise, who like can do this with their eyes closed. I definitely still am only to the point where I can bite and like I have to look and kind of envision. But yeah, that's one of the folds that I can do. And then I'll just do this. So there'll be a little bit of awkward silence. And in between bites, I'll also talk to y'all. This also makes me thankful and grateful that I didn't have braces as a kid, because I have a distinct bite mark where it's two bites, because it's a little bit overlapped. But that's also just like reservation healthcare for you. IHS was a little always underfunded and understaffed. My sister got braces though, but I think that's because she hadn't. There was something with her jaw where she did need it, and for me, it was not a big thing. Um, the Anishinaabe word for birch bark is weegwas, and we also use the birch for our home, or like our ancestors. Our relatives would use them for their homes and wagnagons or wigwams, but also for our canoes, which made them like very light compared to dugout canoes. All right, so I have like the base of the flower, and then now I'm gonna do a petal. Got one petal. I'm gonna do another one. I like to overlap the petal in the middle a little bit. And a little bit of, I think I'm gonna do a dragonfly.
Did you say this is started by babies?
Well, yes, but they wouldn't have anything like this where they would have done designs, but it was just like the instruments they had. They would bite, and like as they teeth, they would leave little marks, and then an auntie or a grandmother or a mom must have seen that, and then yeah, figured out how to do this. Our people, Ojibwe people who are part of the Anishinaabe. Um, so the Anishinaabe are the three council fires. The Potawatomi are Bodaway-Winini, which are the fire builders for our people. And then there's the Ottawa, or the Odawa, which are the traders, the one who like who would have done trading with other tribal nations around us and acted as those mediaries. And then my people, Ojibwe, there's a few different like understandings of how that came to be. It was either for this one word that I'm blanking that means to pucker up, because like it either had to do with our moccasins being puckered, or it had to do with like the ways that we like did warfare with the enemies that were captured. They would be puckered over a fire. But my favorite understanding of it comes from Ojibwe from Ojibiage, to meaning to write, because we recorded our ceremonies and the songs on birch bark scrolls. So this was also a way of recording information. Not all the time. There were birch bark scrolls that people etched symbols into, and those there are a few museums throughout the world, I believe, that actually have some of them in collection that like were not collected in a good way. The White Earth Nation, though, a couple of years back, was able to get back a birch bark scroll that was taken from their community. But yeah, I'll finish the butterfly. I did a little head, and then after that I just build the body. So this takes on a lot of math as well, I think, in terms of geometry. So I would like to think it's really good for the brain. Take one wing. And then I'm going to do just a bug over here. A little manidunts, which means little spirit.
Is it always birch bark?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Does it taste good?
It it doesn't taste like anything.
Okay.
It does when I peel it though. When I peel the layers, it has like a powder on it. But yeah, birch bark was also used to store food. Because it's like it stops rot and stuff. So like I tell people that it's not like I don't think it's disgusting putting like a piece of bark in my mouth. But afterwards, when I do gift these to people, I do try and make sure like, how do you feel about germs? Or like the people that sell, because it is, you can see it's in my business. Doing a little leg. All right, so I've got this little one. I could go in and do a little bit more designs and things, but I want to, for the purpose of time and questions, just open it up for y'all. And this part you have to be very careful because it can sometimes stick. And I always think I'm a little like, do people actually see what I'm seeing when I show people these? Like when I make little people or bugs and things? Like, do they see the flower? Do they see the dragonfly? Or am I
See the
just seeing
dragonfly.
things? Wait, I'll open it this way. This is one of them. And then my favorite thing is when they're seeing through the window. Wow. Or like with light coming through. So those are the dragonflies. And then I think I'm gonna call these wawatesi, which are fireflies or lightning bugs. And then wabigwan is the flower. But yeah, this is one of the ways that I like to, and I know I'm like honoring that femininity in me. But yeah, so here's a little bird bark fighting. Imagine if I can. But I'd like to use up questions for the term two-spirit and other things because it is one that's like so complex and nuanced that it is so hard to like kind of describe since it has many different definitions and meanings to different people, but also it's like so expansive. If there any clarifying?
In like contemporary Native communities today, how accepted is the two-spirit term? Or is there still resistance in certain communities, or is it widely accepted by most Indigenous communities?
It definitely varies from what I've seen, and from what I've experienced. And I will only like really speak to my community because I'm not from other tribal nations. But for Anishinaabe, back home where I'm from, I'm very thankful that on Leech Lake Reservation, we've had pride there for a couple of years, and we've had like a lot of Two Spirit people who have like advocated and have been visible. And that was like my grandma when I was 12. She told me that I was Two Spirit. And that was one of the things that in my household I was very thankful that like my grandparents, because I was raised by my mom for a little bit, but then mostly my grandparents. But my mom and also my grandparents were so accepting and validating and encouraging. So they let me um, play with Barbie dolls, and for Halloween they always let me dress up as Disney princesses. So I remember dressing up as Aurora a couple of years and wearing that pink dress. But there are some communities like further east that like other Ojibwe communities further east that like that is something that's like reemerging, that there are two spirit people there that are like bringing those traditions back. But before that, I think being closer to the East Coast, where a lot of like settlers and a lot of missions first went through hard and heavy, some of those communities have had homophobia and transphobia like inserted into their communities from the boarding schools and also the missions. So from like what I could speculate off of that, I do think like regardless wherever, whether it's a rural community, a tribal community, there are going to be queer people. And so like there are those queer people that are doing that good work of decolonizing, of bringing relatives who might have understandings of gender and sexuality that aren't traditional, bringing them back to those traditions, or also creating new traditions if like words and stuff like that have been lost. Because for me and the way that I understand being Ojibwe, we I mean, I think for all communities as well, like culture is dynamic and it does change, and like we're modern people, and so like there is that fine line of like traditionalism, but that I use traditionalism in like quotes because I'm also like, how sure are we that like those things that like some some people are saying is tradition is actually tradition and not something that's been imposed through boarding schools or like just living under the system of like, or not the system but these ideas of cis heteronormativity and monogamy, like Anishinaabe communities, my community, um like monogamy was not like that widely practiced. Of course, there were cases, but like there yeah, that's something that like has been introduced via like settlers. But yeah, and that's also one of the things that like for our people, our clans are they descend from the father. But like I've talked with other Anishinaabe people about how that might actually be something that was put into our communities, because like you you know who your mother is and you know like for a fact, versus with your father like that's something that like is can be a little speculative. um but yeah, so I hope I answered that in roundabout ways. Any other questions?
Another question. The term Burdosh, um, who originally coined that? Was that originally like a native term that was like then turned negative by settlers and Westerners, or?
No, it the root of it comes from Arabic,
Oh,
but it Arabic to French. The French mainly used it, and the French used it as like to describe like um passive homosexual or like a sodomite, or like cross dresser, which yeah are not at all what these respected tribal community members were. Um, but yeah, so like all throughout like journals and stuff, you can find that term for. I would be willing to bet all tribal nations, but that's a big bet because we're all like one of the things there's another conversation that I stew on and I think about, and that's this big like this this talk about how like the binary that we have is Western and it is colonial. But I don't think that inherently means that there weren't gender roles for different communities and stuff, because for Anishinaabe, there were those gender roles. Of course, they were fluid, just like the land, because like everyone needed to know how to hunt, how to build a home, how to like tan hides and stuff. That's one of the other things that like I'm gonna start doing this fall is to tan hides, because tanning hides for Anishinaabe have traditionally been done and was done and is done by the women. So that's another thing that I'm going to be doing to like honor that. And I'm also very thankful that my community lets me, not lets me, but embraced me in dancing jingle dress, which is our healing dance. And my mom, she's been sober for over 2.5 years. I'm forgetting the exact day count, but because of that, not because of that, but one of the things from that, she's making her jingle dress now, and so hopefully at the end of the summer we're going to be able to dance together as mom and child. Because I've only danced at Two-Spirit powwows, and I've only also danced like on my own. I've not yet danced in just a regular powwow, a contest powwow or anything. But yeah, I was approached by a jingle dress maker who is also, she's a fashion designer and she makes jewelry. Delina White. She was putting on an an exhibit, a show on like the evolution of the jingle dress from old style to contemporary and all the in between. And as a part of the, she had me close it out as like returning to, and also the future of like that full circle moment of like going back to our acceptance and our love for Two-Spirit relatives. So she had me, she helped me make my jingle dress along with my mom and my sister-in-law. And yeah, so that was a really special moment. And like at that show, there were Fond du Lac and other Ojibwe community members that were there that like just embraced me, and it was really nice. So I'm very thankful for that.
When is the powwow?
Oh, there's lots of powwows throughout. So northern Minnesota, we have 7 Anishinaabe reservations all across the state, and then there's Dakota communities down south that also have their powwows. And so my community where I grew up, we have our powwow middle of July, and we call that Miigwech Minoman Days. But there'll be powwows all the way up until like end of September, and even then there's powwows in the winter. They just moved into the casinos
Yeah.
after that. But
And then the Two-Spirit, was it a specifically?
yeah, there's Two-Spirit powwows all across like Turtle Island. There's one that I had the opportunity to go to in San Francisco, hosted by Bates, and that's where Matthew was. Or well, yeah,
It was amazing.
Yeah, it was really sweet. There were lots of Two-Spirit people from various tribal nations that were there to dance, and yeah. But back home in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, there's a Two-Spirit powwow that's next weekend, which I'll be up north with my family, not in the city, so I won't be able to make it to that. But I went to that one last year and I danced, and that was really special. But Wisconsin, there's even one in Montana. I'm sure there's some around here. But yeah, I'm very excited for that.
So many questions. So obviously Two-Spirit is specific to Indigenous queer identity, which I love the term as well too, but what can like non-Indigenous people learn from Two-Spirit identity? And do you think there'll ever be like an equivalent in like non-Indigenous like queer communities? I'm just curious because it seems like it's such a special thing and it makes a lot of sense, but what does it mean for like non-Indigenous people?
For non-Indigenous people, I think that would be like they have there's a bunch of beautiful identities that are out there that they would be able to like get language for to describe themselves. And ultimately, all of our queer experience and all of our experiences in general are personalized and are a part of like ourselves. So we get to like define that for ourselves. But I would think that like if someone, I'm trying to rephrase how I said that, because then now I'm thinking like there could be someone who's not native who's like, I feel Ojibwe inside, but they probably that would be a case where I'm like, I don't know about that. But one of the things that like since I do give this talk, not this one specifically, there's one that I give that's about an hour long that goes through like historical records, and it also has I love it so much because I've spent I've probably given it 10 times, so now it's kind of like the back of my hand. Like I don't actually have to like look at the slides to say all of the stuff. But at the end, I make sure to emphasize that like prior to colonization, the land that we're all on, the history that's here on this land has always been of acceptance and of love for people that are like us. Because like for Anishinaabe terms, those terms aren't necessarily specific to us. They're descriptor words. They're gender terms that like if we had someone that we were trying to describe and like they told us how they wanted to be described, if we were speaking the language, we would use those terms for them. But I don't think that like that would necessarily give them the like permission to like use that and identify with that all the time, except for those cases where they're around Anishinaabe communities, just because I think that that would be a little bit yeah, no, not that I don't want to be like gatekeepy or like a gatekeeper around that, but that's just I don't see how that would be like if they're talking to someone who's not Anishinaabe, how that would come up or why that would come up, without it being a little like I don't know, yeah, but
I feel like as you're saying, there's so much of a restricted binary that's been brought up in Westernisms, especially through residential schools with our elders, and some of them that do lose the language and lose the words for these old identities. What advice do you have for trying to teach our elders and to reintroduce these ideas to folks that may see themselves as very traditional but not incorporate
I
the other
think
ways of being?
sorry.
Please.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say I think like it's a that's a hard one because like there's that trying to hold space for the knowledge and knowing that like this is someone who has been harmed by these systems and that's why they might necessarily or not might necessarily but they would have these beliefs and they would be so instilled in them. I think just like a series of gentle conversations and educations maybe around different tribes, because one of the things that I've found with talking to other community like tribal communities is there's not this like urge to evangelize or like to push this specific tribal belief onto another, but like the knowledge that like we all have our own traditions and our own stories, maybe starting with like some of the surrounding traditions where like you could just say like hey this is something that's like I think like planting all those seeds leading up to like different conversations. So like the way that I probably would go about that would be like um first like saying like there are communities that are out there that like that is traditional for them, and like the way that they view two-spirit people or queer people or people who are outside of the way that we understand people today, like were created like that by the creator, by Giiwedin, or by they're exactly how they're supposed to be. And that's something that like there are those words in those communities for those people, and there's traditions and roles around that. And like from there, like leading up to different conversations to like, well, I wonder like if that's also something that like is in our community as well, and like maybe just sharing different information and stuff with them, and journals. But yeah, that is a hard one because like with sometimes not all the time but sometimes with age there's that sternness especially like with that traditionalism, um, but yeah that's a good question and that's also like really that's a hard one. And it's also like it is a sad one too because like you know and like you know the reason why they are thinking in that framework, and it's because of the boarding schools and the Jesuits and it's because of colonization. Um, but yeah, that's also another thing I try to talk about is there is no decolonial work without also the work of bringing those traditions of honoring people that we would maybe call two-spirit, or like insert the word for those tribal communities of bringing them back to your community and accepting them. Um, yeah. Any other questions? Maybe just like a question about the work I do or my people, or if you wanted to share anything, I would love to also have conversations about like your communities and like if there's two-spirit resurgence and stuff happening here. Yeah.
Do you do any weaving?
Weaving? I don't. I harvest wild rice. Which I see the weaving in terms of like weaving through the rice beds and stuff. Um, but that is something that I would love to also learn throughout this lifetime is weaving cedar, and also weaving cattails. For that, so one of the goals that I have for the coming years is to build a Wagnagon, a wigwam lodge on my family's land back home. Um, we were able to get some land off of the private market within our reservation, because that's also another thing that like a lot of people don't know, but I'm sure that we all know here is that like reservations are checkerboarded, a majority of them, and that like in the community that I grew up in, Bow Club, there is like a lot of surrounding us like private property, and especially private property that's on like lakes and stuff, and that's because of legislation and just outright like land theft, like way back during like yeah just but my family, we got 8 acres, and that's where we've been hosting like the wild rice camp, and stuff, where I teach relatives and friends, and basically anyone that wants to come up and build a relationship with land. Um, because like if you're gonna live in an area, I do think if you're gonna live in an area, you should have a connection to like the space and like know the plants, and also just because it deepens, and it like it deepens your relationship with nature, and also with that deepening relationship with nature, um, it inspires other people to like give a crap about like actually doing stuff as well. So like if like they have that relationship, they're more likely to go to a rally or like go to like a resistance camp that's like trying to stop a pipeline or other stuff, which there are things that are brewing back home where I'm from, different fights against different corporations and stuff that are trying to like extract from our lands and put pipelines through the waters that like provide life to all of us. But yeah, I love the weaving though. Like I've been seeing a lot of weaving down here, and beautiful.
When is the workshops you do for the rice?
That happens end of August all throughout September. The fall, the end of summer transition into fall. That's when the wild rice is ready on the lakes and rivers. Um, and that's one of the things that like the first time that I hosted it, it was like all queer people. This last year, it was still was like majority queer people, but there were different affinity groups that were coming through. And then this next year, they're going to be same group of folks and some new folks that are coming, and it's open invitation to anyone that's that wants to and is able to come up to Minnesota and camp, because the land, it's just land. There's no infrastructure there yet. So the last couple of years we've only had a composting toilet. So that's always like fun to try and explain to new people. But yeah.
So they would just go to your
Yeah, go to
Instagram.
my Instagram, and like that's something where like there's if people are interested in actually coming out and like making a drive or like flying in, there's ways to coordinate rides up there. It's right in my home community. There's a lake a mile away that like is used for swimming. It's very beautiful. And like it's in the past, and I also hope that this is how it will always be. It's always been like communal. Like people bring up food. There's no like the different affinity groups that come through organizations or institutions. They like pay things sometimes, but that's not something that I would ever ask for like relatives and friends or people who are genuinely interested in like coming up. The only ask is that like you bring like all the stuff that you would need like to camp. But if you don't have all the stuff, there's also like wiggle room to try and ask around, and there's mutual aid to like borrow camping gear and like other clothes and stuff. Um, but yeah, and around that time of year, it's the weather varies quite a bit. It can be like 40 degrees at night sometimes, and like upwards of like 80 to 90 degrees during the day, or even around 60. But it was really beautiful, and it's all, yeah, it's fun. So any of the folks that are here, if y'all ever want to come out, that would be really fun. And I'm sure that there's like powwows and other things that are happening around then. Yeah, and we share food. Yeah, it's really really fun. That's my main passion is wild rice harvesting.
Yeah.
Question, because you mentioned the pipeline, and I remember like 6 months ago, I think it was, there was some, I'm going to use a bad word, fuckery from the federal government around specifically the lakes in Minnesota, and getting rid of some laws or passing new laws. Is that related to that?
It's not. It's another thing that's added on. It's the boundary waters.
That's right. Yeah.
The boundary waters up into Canada, which is also like, there's a whole conversation to be had around that as well, because like the boundary waters, from my experience and all of the people that I grew up experience, it's always like wealthy people, so like not native people that are up in northern Minnesota that get access to go there. Because it is quite literally just like you go through outfitters who have like canoes and like all the materials that you would need to like go through those chain of lakes and like camp for multiple days. And like that's pretty expensive, so that's a barrier to entry. So that's something that like I didn't do growing up, but a lot of folks that I know, who I do know like their backgrounds, and they come from like, I wouldn't necessarily say wealth, but like we're comfortable, because I come from like a family that lived in poverty, and so like anytime I see anything that's like not what I necessarily grew up with, I just assume that that's wealth, but I know that's not the case. But they grew up doing like family trips there, things like that. But so that's one of the things in my adulthood where I have adult money now. I'm gonna hopefully do like one of those trips soon. But like it's something where you kind of do have to go through, like you have to book through outfitters and stuff, so it fills up fast. So there's only like a select number of people that can go up there, yeah, during the season. But it's so gorgeous. Like there's zero light pollution. The lakes are so clean. You can drink from them if you boil them, if you boil the water. But yeah, that's the I think it was the courts, they lifted those bans, and so there is potential for mining there now after
That's what it was. Yeah.
20 or around like multiple years. Yeah. But there's wild rice up there, and there's also the nearest tribal community is either Grand Portage and also Boys Fort, and they're both Ojibwe. Right.
One of the reasons I'm asking is I'm curious because I've been looking for ways to support the fights up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if you have.
Yeah,
'Cause I
there's
don't-
Friends of the Boundary Water. There's also GNU Collective. GNU Collective, I would pitch more as like the one that, because Friends of the Boundary Water, it's a nonprofit. They do really good work, but they also have lots of institutional funds and things.
Yeah.
Versus GNU Collective is native led. It's led by a Two-Spirit matriarch, Tara Huska, who does awesome work. And like their work is centered around liberation, and everything, like all good stuff. And they do some rad stuff, and I'm sure are planning some rad things.
And are they fighting the pipeline also?
A bunch of different things.
Okay.
So they're also pipeline.
I want to get some information from you.
But yeah, GNU Collective, but also Water Over Nickel. That's the one specifically for the Tamarack mine, where they've been taking samples, and they have a deal with an alleged deal with Tesla, with Elon Musk for nickel for electric vehicles, and that's like they're looking at putting that mine and mining for copper and nickel from an area that has like the most abundant wild rice in the world. Because wild rice used to grow all the way from the East Coast out towards past Minnesota, all the way down to Texas and like Florida. And there's still is rice in Texas, but it's not as abundant. It's endangered, and there's like, yeah, Minnesota is the place with the highest populations of wild rice beds. But yeah, it that wasn't always the case. But since industrialization, colonization, populations have dwindled all across. But yeah, now they want to put a mine there. Yeah, poison the water.
So I'm just gonna wind down to the filming. Just in general, like how can our following support you in what you do? Because I think it's amazing how much knowledge, how much forward thinking that goes on in this beautiful human being I'm looking at is like, the best way that we can support you on your journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I think plugging into all of those things that I was just talking about in terms of like the GNU Collective, Water Over Nickel, Friends with the Boundary Waters. There's stuff happening specifically for Line 5 as well. Just all of it, like plugging in and supporting them supports me because the work and the fight that they all are doing is like directly protecting like me as well. And like I'm hoping that like I'll also be able to like go up and plug in more and do stuff with them. But there's some personal things that like I think would keep me from putting myself in potential situations to where I would be not yeah I don't know how much I can say like in terms of like
Yeah, we understand. And then, of course, supporting all your artwork that you're doing and placement of that artwork around for sure would be one other way. But thank you so much for coming. I'm gonna just stop recording and.
all right. Hey, Grace. Oh yeah, okay.